Have I gone back in time? Is this what's going on now? Julian Draxler, Arsenal. I ain't got time for this, man. Of course, we've got time for it. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series, show in which we look at the players that have been linked to Arsenal, break them down in an analytical and statistical way with the help of expert insight, as well as we discuss the man from the past has come to the future. As Arsenal fans have witnessed today and yesterday on social media and across the news outlets that reported that the Guendouzi interest from PSG is legit, and supposedly they are willing to offer their German midfielder in kind of a swap deal. We're still waiting for more details as to more of the legitimacy of the actual Draxler side of things. The Guendouzi side of things doesn't seem to be too much in question. It's the swap deal with Draxler and whether any cash is involved as to whether this is a real thing or not. I can't wait to get some of your comments showing up a little bit later on in the show. But as we do with these, what we like to kick off with is our expert insight. And there's only one man on earth that you can go to when you want to talk about a player who's coming from French football. And that is, of course, our good friend Jeremy Smith at Jeremy Smith98. Make sure you check him out on Twitter. He is everywhere. He has been Arsenal's favourite French man this summer. And it's an absolute pleasure to have him on the show again. So make sure you listen deep. He's on holiday and he's still giving us information. This is how dedicated Jeremy is to our show. I'm loving that. And apologies for any sort of background noise. He is in Brighton, in fairness. So fair play to him for giving us the insight. So let's kick on with that.
So the latest Ligue 1-based player being connected with Arsenal is Julian Draxler, who's being talked about in some kind of swap deal or make weight with Guendouzi making his way from Arsenal to PSG. This doesn't really make a lot of sense to me on first thought. Firstly, I'm not sure that Guendouzi is the right player for PSG, but speaking from the Draxler point of view, when the rumour came out yesterday, I saw someone tweet something like, because Arsenal really need a flaky attacking German attacking midfielder at the moment. And I suppose there are kind of comparisons with Ozil. Both sort of came onto the scene very young as really talented attacking players, both obviously full German internationals who have had a lot of success, certainly early in their career, but obviously maybe not to the same extent as Ozil, but Draxler as well is sort of in a not a purgatory, but he's sort of, we're not really sure where he is in his career right now. He's been at PSG for 3-4 years, and in that time he's never really made a name for himself in the first team. He's kind of been in and out, sub as often as a starter, and maybe it is time for him to move on. I think part of the problem is that he's been shipped all over the pitch. So even as a holding midfielder, which he's not, I don't think he can tackle, but all over the midfield, either in the centre or on either flank, even on the flanks in the attacking third as well. And he's sort of coming across as a jack of all trades, but maybe master of none, and that's the problem. Part of that is PSG's fault for not really knowing what to do with him, and he's certainly not the only player that they're guilty of doing that disservice to. But I suppose you also have to give him a little bit of discredit for not really making a name for himself in any one position to make himself a sort of indisputable even starter. He's obviously a real talent when he wants to be. I think he's an excellent dribbler. He's very comfortable on the ball. He's got a brilliant eye for a pass. For me, that's his strongest thing. In theory, that being a really good assister, and he can finish as well. So all the talent is there. It's just that he's now 26, so he's kind of reaching the peak of his career. But certainly the last 3-4 years at PSG, he's done very little. And that's where you'd be expecting him to push on. And when he was signed, a lot of people thought he was going to be one of Europe's next best midfielders, and that certainly hasn't happened. obviously at Arsenal with a possibly weaker squad than at PSG, you can say that he's going to have more chance of getting into the first team and playing his way into being one of their main men. But I just feel it's a little bit of a risk. It could go either way, and if Arteta can get the best out of him, then there could be a real bargain there and a quality player. But I just feel like 3-4 years now, that's a long time without showing his best, or even showing that what he showed 3-4 years ago. There's no sort of obvious sign that he's going to improve, that he's necessarily even got the mentality or the desire to improve. And you know, even though it's PSG, I feel like if he can't make a name for himself in the in Ligue 1, I really feel like he'd struggle to kind of impose himself in the sort of hustle and bustle of the Premier League. So for me, I'm not really convinced about this one at all.
Yeah, it's tough reading, isn't it? It's tough reading when it comes down to talking about Julian Draxler, because when we were linked to him when he was, of course, at Schalke, there was a lot of hope behind him, and you have to be honest about it. And I was at the time too. I was desperate to see him join Arsenal. At the time, it was before we'd really gone big on as a regular occasion as we have done in more recent years, and I would have quite have liked to see him bud at Arsenal. When he went to PSG, it was very much a case of, really, is that the right move? And it's obviously proven not to be the case whatsoever. And that's led to some really disappointing sort of stagnated development at the club. He's still got quality. I think that's undeniable. The player has got quality about it. The question would be, is this deal worth it? You're losing Guendouzi in this swap deal, who is one of Arsenal's. I know it's ironic to call him one of Arsenal's most sellable assets, and I know that they're struggling to sort of pile him off, but he is someone that could fetch a fee, no matter what that fee might be. But he could fetch a fee for the Gunners, and to swap him for maybe a Draxler instead of getting any money for him whatsoever, which could be reinvested into an Aouar or a Partey. I'm not sure whether that's the right route to go down, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to look at him in our usual tactical breakdown way. So let's start off with kind of look at him as a player. What does he do? What's his strong suits? What does he really do well? Well, one of the things that he carried over from Schalke is that he finds space in forward positions excellently. The way that he's found by his teammates in these areas leave him open to so much space, and he uses that space really well. He's got a decent side of pace about him too, which leads him into attacking positions. And the eye for a pass that he was so sort of talismanically given at Schalke has not dwindled whatsoever. When he is playing for PSG, he is someone that you can rely on to find those small gaps between the defensive lines. In this example here against Dijon, he does it brilliantly well, which leads to Mbappe getting through and scoring too. And in another recent game, I believe this was possibly a friendly during the lockdown period. It might have been actually a cup game. But in this game as well, the pass in behind, playing on the right-hand side, and I think this actually highlights his versatility, is also ambidextrousness. He's been able to use both feet really well. For a creative style player is obviously something that we got from Santi really well. And I'm not saying they're similar players because they're not, but just in that specific trait, when it does come down to creation, having the ability to use both feet really well is a really strong adaptive trait for an attacking midfielder. And Draxler has that. And you find that with this example here that leads through to Sarabia having a chance at goal. And then the final opportunity I want to show you is one against Lille, in which our new boy Gabriel doesn't cover him in the best amount of glory here. As Draxler drives at the back line, pulls out our new Brazilian defender, and that leaves a space wide open for Di Maria to take the ball on the far right-hand side, and eventually he goes through and scores, completely splitting that Lille defence at the time. And it's an interesting player. I think that his creative-wise is something about him that could do Arsenal good, but statistically we need to look at a lot of things, and let's do that now. So positionally, he is thought of as an attacking midfielder. He has played, as Jeremy said, in other positions just to accommodate him at times and just to give him minutes on the pitch, but he likes to technically drift over to that left flank. You can see that there with the heat map. He has actually been fielded in a left wing position for PSG at times from the off, or come off the bench to play on a left wing role role. His ability to use both feet means that he can play across that front three line, which is a nice trait to have and certainly something that an attribute rather that Arteta will enjoy from having with depth in his team. If we have a look at some of his passing stats, 87.8% passing accuracy is good for an attacking midfielder, someone that wants to be creative and risky. I like it a lot. And that boils down even better when we look into passes into the final third. 82.7% is really strong. And even better than that, passes into the penalty area, 66.7 is a very high percentage for a risky pass scenario like passing into the box. So I'm liking that position a lot. If we have a look at his attacking statistics specifically here, I'll zoom in so you can see those better. No goals this season, which is something that I've seen a few people highlight in the chat box. He's got 5 assists across it. And I understand that for people that goals are really important, but I don't think making a judgment on his goal scoring ability on this season, I'm not sure if it's fair or not. It's a really tricky one to talk about. He only played 11 league games for Liga, for PSG in Liga this season, and whether or not that's enough of a sample size to really turn around and say he's not a goal scoring midfielder. I mean, what we can do is we can sort of go back and have a look at previous seasons. Liga this season, he scored none in 2018-19. For PSG, he ended up putting 3 goals and 8 assists in 31 games, where he played a lot more minutes for the French champions. If we go back to 2017-18, in Liga, he scored 4 goals and 5 assists in 30 league games. So he's getting minutes. It's just the fact that this season it just didn't happen for them. Obviously, they signed Pablo Sarabia. He kind of took on more of a role in the forefront of that team instead of Julian Draxler. And that has cost him ultimately in the minutes. And then when we go back to the 2015-16, where he was still playing for Schalke, 6 goals and 6 assists in 24 games. But obviously this is 5 years ago when he was 20 years old, all the world at his feet. And I suppose when you think about what he was doing then, he's not really kicked on and improved those numbers in a league for a team that dominates. Maybe you could argue he should have done. As Jeremy said, he's not kicked on. And that is a really big concern for me, to think about a player that's been at a club like PSG and hasn't been able to improve his goals and assist statistics more than what he was doing at Schalke. It might be the position, it might be the system, it might be the lack of faith in him from the team, it might be his morale. There might be loads of factors that come into it, but ultimately it's a little bit concerning. Dribbles, when he does drive forward, 63.6% of those are successful. 71.4% of his crosses, even though they're not frequent, are accurate as well. And that's a really good stat. If you think about Hector Bellerin's crossing statistics being a 27% accuracy and Julian Draxler's there being 71.4, that kind of shows you how clinical he is when he does get into a crossing position. 2.85 progressive run shows how much he wants to get forwards. In terms of creativity, he's giving 1.5 shot assists per game. So when he does get on the pitch, for however many minutes he is on, he is still putting forward a creative amount in that game. Defensively, we kind of talked about the fact that he has played further back on the pitch. 5.38 defensive duels, and he's winning 50% of those is not bad for an attacking midfielder, and neither is winning 55.6 of your aerial duels too. Nearly 50% of the loose ball duels he's also winning, and nearly 3 interceptions for a forward-thinking player is actually quite nice. Losses to recoveries, though, for a player that likes to be creative and take risks, you would expect those losses to be higher, but the fact that 31.7% of them are in his own half is a little concerning. I'd like to see that stat kind of in the 20s, low 20s, even not the teens in that stage. Recoveries, though, winning 62% of his 5 recovering in each game in the opposition half is actually a small redemption in terms of those stats area. So that's kind of it in regards to the statistics and then the analysis and the expert insight. So now we move to the chat box to get your thoughts on Julian Draxler. So very quickly, if I could just give a shout out to you guys and be like, in the chat box, can you tell me, do you want Draxler? Do you not want him? And tell me why. Explain your answers. I want to know your reasoning for your decision behind getting Draxler or not. Let's scroll up, see if I've missed any comments earlier on in the chat. I probably have done. Cole Hellberg says, getting Draxler would be a bigger mistake than getting Denis Suarez. Wow, that is an unbelievably harsh criticism of Draxler. Rashid says, Draxler rejected us and now he wants us because his career is in the mud and wants to revive himself personally. I won't take him. Wow, that is, again, even more criticism of the German. Christopher Fung says, Draxler is so inconsistent and not worth it. Wages and injury history are not ideal. I'm not actually sure what his wages are specifically. I'm playing for PSG. I can imagine they are quite high. But in terms of an exact figure, I'm not too sure. Highbury over Emirates says Arsenal is genuinely serious about getting our deal done. Getting Draxler wouldn't make sense if it goes through. We also have Smith Rowe waiting on the flanks, and I definitely agree that if we do sign Draxler and say you do get an Aouar as well, the route for an Emile Smith-Rowe suddenly looks very, very congested and not something I'm really behind whatsoever. Vinny Eagle says, who needs a tall Jack Wilshere? Draxler adds nothing to the team. Alan says, we need players on the up. Draxler is a huge risk and we don't need that right now. Rodney says, I'm not a fan of it, to be honest. I feel like taking failed players from other big clubs is just a risk. We don't need it right now when Emile Smith-Rowe is there for us. Tom says Draxler is on his last year of his contract, being paid handsomely, and will get a big signing on fee next summer after winning more trophies in France. He doesn't want to move anyway. Corey says, I wouldn't take him. He just doesn't have the right mentality. Javier says he's on 420k a month. That can't be true. That can't be true. That's ridiculous. Tom comes in with a more respectable 170,000 euros per week, which is about 120,000 pounds per week. So it's a lot of money. It's about the same as what Kolasinac is on, just over. So do we really want another player that's not going to be at the forefront of our thoughts on over 100 grand a week? Probably not. Carl Halberg says we don't need Draxler for either left or attacking midfield. Guendouzi is worth more to us as transfer funds than a swap for an inconsistent and unconvincing attacking midfielder. And I think that's where you have to draw the line with this, is that Guendouzi is a sellable asset to us. We know that we're trying to struggle to sell him. But if we are going to sell him, it needs to be for cash. It can't be for someone like Drax. So it just doesn't make too much sense. Yes, I get this creation. And I think you said in some of the graphics today that he is a creative player and he is someone that can feed balls between the lines. But he's doing it for a PSG side and he's doing it in just not very speculative circumstances on a consistent basis. And that is the big problem with this deal. Thank you ever so much for tuning in for today's show as we broke down Julian Draxler. Tomorrow, I am planning on giving you not one, but two shows in terms of a tactical breakdown, an updated tactical breakdown on the one and only Thomas Partey. So make sure you tune in for that. I will have John Driscoll back, who of course was the guy who hosts La Liga Weekly. Fantastic podcast. You should check it out. But I interviewed John way back in January about Thomas Partey, and the words from John were, it ain't happening, guys. He was so sure that he'd be never coming to Arsenal. Well, 6 months later, 7 months later, 9 months later even, and things are very, very, very different. So let's see what John now has to say on the Ghanaian midfielder in tomorrow's show. And also, the season is upon us, which means the first full Raw Reactions preview show will be out tomorrow as well as we look ahead to Arsenal's game away at Fulham. But if you want to get some preview stuff now and you haven't checked out yesterday's massive TGT season preview show, then you definitely want to do that. Myself, Lee, Andy, Mike, French, Ola, Drew and Owen all joined the panel to have a look ahead to that game. So make sure you drop a like on today's video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn those notifications on so you never miss a show. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you as it always is. And as always, up the Arsenal.